What's going on, saxophone friends? This is Tyler Anderson with getasax.com. Today we are going to be having a conversation about the importance of having a good overhaul on your horns with none other than my former teacher, Dr. Doug O'Connor. Doug has performed across Asia, Europe, and the United States, including appearances at the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, Carnegie Hall, and Philadelphia's Kimmel Center for the Performing Arts. He holds DMA and MM degrees from the Eastman School of Music and a BM in saxophone performance from the University of Maryland. He recently served as adjunct assistant professor of saxophone at the Eastman School of Music and is currently employed as ceremonial saxophonist with the United States Army Band Pershing's Own. All right, Doug, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here. Good to see you again, Tyler.
So for those that are watching, can you let everyone know what you're up to in your career currently?
Sure. So as you heard in Tyler's very kind introduction, I started as a professor. It was my first job, actually, at a college as a visiting professor of saxophone at University of Wisconsin in Eau Claire. After that, since it was a temporary emergency position, I found employment with the United States Naval Academy Bands in 2012, worked for them for about 4 years, and then switched over to the United States Army Band Pershing's Own, which is located at Arlington National Cemetery, Fort Myer in Virginia. And I've been with them just over 4 years now. There's always people out there questioning the value of music, and do we really need this? And, but one of the things that doesn't get questioned at a job like the United States Army Band is no one questions the value of performing for memorial affairs, services, fallen veterans, the role of music in diplomacy with other nations when they come visit. Above and beyond that, there's just some incredible musicians in that building. And when you're employed in the ceremonial band, as I am, you get to switch hit. You get to play in the concert band, you get to play in the blues, which is a world-class jazz ensemble. About a year ago, I did a project called Saxophone Genesis, which was funded by a grant from the DC Commission of Arts and Humanities. We got 5 new pieces of music written for saxophone and a multitude of other instruments. And it was a really fun, grand project, definitely one of the heaviest things I've done in a while. And we performed all this at the Kennedy Center on the Millennium Stage. So that was super, super exciting. And I want to do more of that kind of stuff as we go forward.
One of the first things that I heard you play was a recording of you playing Jungle, and I think that was at the Eastman School of Music. So I'm curious for you as a player, playing extremely difficult music like that, what do you expect out of the saxophone itself?
That's funny. Okay, so with Jungle in particular, after making that video, I went and visited the composer, Christian Lauba, who is a fabulous individual. He lives in Bordeaux, or lived then. I assume he still does. And he was, I'd say his aesthetic is about sort of the athleticism. Part of the excitement of writing music and performing music is the same sort of excitement you might get from watching sports. This is my own personal interpretation. It's not that he said this, but he's trying to push the envelope of the generation of players. And I think more so than many composers of his time, he really did. He wrote a bunch of these etudes that are designed to develop extended techniques in young budding saxophonists. And so he was telling me when I was visiting, he's constantly on the phone with Patrick Selmer, yelling at him, wanting his instruments to be more in tune, for the technique to be quieter. And frankly, Christian Lauba was one of the most effective coaches I've ever had. He's not a saxophonist per se, but he's intimately acquainted with the instrument. He basically has his own private saxophonist he works with on a frequent basis, Richard Ducrot. And so, I remember there was this technique he was trying to get me to do, which is so you're moving in this piece from a A to side B flat trill pretty fast. It comes from a double trill at first, which uses two fingers on the key, and so it's a very effect-based kind of trill texture. And then it starts to expand in interval. And so at a point, you're going from a G written to a B flat, basically. And these guys like, no, it must be faster. It must be faster. Just lock up your arm and shake it. And it's like, sure enough, that did the trick. So he is that composer that you bring up is really interested in making the saxophone better as a piece of mechanism. But also what goes on in that piece is there's a lot of fast, quiet playing down low, like in the palette keys. And yeah, you're kind of dead in the water on a lot of that stuff if your equipment isn't functioning correctly. And one of the reasons why on a saxophone, right, if it's not sealing just right, then you find yourself pressing the keys a little too hard, right? And what I found is that any excess force that you apply to a key when you close it translates into lifting your finger higher off the key when you release it. The source of that problem is invisible. You can't see how hard people are squeezing the keys normally. And so that efficiency is pressing a key down just enough and hardly any more at all. You don't get to play that way unless you're playing on an instrument that allows you to play that way. Yeah, the condition of the horn is really important, because if I'm not comfortable with playing, if I'm struggling, I'm not really having as much fun as I feel like I should be on stage. I don't want to be thinking about playing accurately when I'm performing. And so what I'm doing in the practice room is I'm constantly trying to train a sense of comfort over a difficult piece of music.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that you brought up the amount of pressure that is required to hold the keys down, because that is kind of the first line of defense that I think we probably do subconsciously when stuff isn't working out or you're working in the low range of the horn, is you start to grip harder.
For the same reason it's hard to, rub your belly and tap your head, it's kind of hard to squeeze your fingers and not squeeze your mouth around the reed and the mouthpiece.
The saxophone is made to function with a solid signal. You shouldn't necessarily have to mess around what you're doing with your mouthpiece to get the horn to play. The low range is, at least for me, and tell me what you think, is where I notice it the most. If there's issues with my horn, no matter where they are, they're gonna affect the low range, because I find that there's, it feels like a narrower window in that register of the horn.
There's more opportunities for things to go wrong all the way at the end of the pipe.
Right, and it's challenging, and for a lot of the music that you're playing, you're expecting a lot of flexibility out of the low range of the saxophone.
Okay, so recently the Army needed to purchase a new tenor saxophone, and they asked me to shop for one, pick one. They gave me a budget. There are rules about acquiring musical instruments and property in the military, and so I needed to pick a new horn. And so I ended up going with a Selmer Reference 36. But that horn needed a repad brand new. Like right away, wasn't functioning right, gurgling on an F, or, just stuff. You're not able to play comfortably and in a streamlined way. To get it to work right, I'd have to, mess with my embouchure, do things like you're talking about, which in time, over practice, if uncorrected, can lead to bad habits. I liked the way the sound was kicking on it, even though I could tell it wasn't set up right.
Yeah.
And so it's a little disappointing, but that it was a solid horn. It just needed work right out of the gate.
So yeah, I'm curious, like what things did you notice?
Well, for one thing, around certain parts of the range of the instrument, like in the case of that saxophone, around like second space A flat G, and getting down into F. So that range of the horn was just kind of gurgling, and it wouldn't quite like play between, I'd say, pianissimo and mezzo piano without issues, without splitting the octave. And it would sort of go away if I squeezed a key extra hard. And that's a guarantee that something's not right. Like maybe the back of the pad is hitting the tone hole a little too early. And I don't really know. I'm not a saxophone tech. Mm-hmm. I just know what it feels like now after having had good work done. When the saxophone is set up right, what I feel like I can do is I can play the sweet spot on the mouthpiece. Like if I took my mouthpiece off the horn and played where I got my best sound, I should sort of be able to play every single note on the horn like that, and the saxophone does the rest of the work for me. Unless I get in the way and try to correct a problem by creating another.
For you, how would you decide if you're practicing something and you're struggling with it? How would you be able to decide, like, is that an issue with the horn, or is that something that I just need to practice?
Well, it deserves mention that like the horn is never going to be perfect, and so you know I don't live in this space, and I don't want to encourage anyone to live in the space where it's not your fault, it's the horn's fault or something like that. Like you have to practice in a way that you can execute and be flexible enough to execute in less than ideal conditions on stage, under pressure, with changing weather, etc. So that's all of our own responsibility, cross to bear. But to the extent that you reasonably can, like set yourself up for success. So if you are, I don't know, like let's take something a lot of students struggle with, like classically difficult situation. The first note of Alfred Desenclos prelude, cadence, and finale, right? Is coming in on a low B after the piano entrance, like in time, with confidence, with a good sound, and this kind of moody, spooky, dark vibe. That, I mean, if you're not able to, like, you're never going to do that reliably if you don't have a replicable, comfortable situation that you can sort of trust, right? If you're going to fill the situation with tension and angst and like trying harder, it's not going to be a good, reliable result, right? And so that's an example where if the saxophone isn't functioning properly, I might end up doing myself more harm than good by trying more and more to get something to work that is not really well, like the example I can think of is sometimes when players go from like a high C down to a G, there's this cracking of the G, right? And I found that I can produce that reliably if I just make sure my forefinger is a little late to the game, that the B key closes just a tiny bit later than the G key, right? And of course, that's a problem that if it happens, you're tempted to fix it with your embouchure or voice it differently, but that's the wrong fix, right? That's solving one problem with a different counteracting problem, but now you're managing two problems and the balance between them. The problem is that the timing of the fingers is wrong. You can just keep your embouchure and your voicing and all that stuff, like kicking your best sound out of the line signal, to use the analogy further. And so in the same way, I mean, even though that's a technique problem, I don't want to waste my time in the practice room fixing adjustment problems.
All right, everybody, thanks for watching. Please let us know in the comments what you think, or if you have any questions. Make sure to visit www.dougoconnor.com to check out more of his music, and please hop on getasax.com if you're looking to buy or sell gear. All right, see you, everybody.